Hello and welcome to episode 33 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. This month, the 24th official James Bond movie, Spectre, hits theaters, so we've gone back to the third Bond movie, Goldfinger. Ryan has been a pretty big Bond fan most of his life, and while I haven't actively avoided Bond movies, I've never gotten around to seeing Sean Connery as 007. Since Goldfinger is one of Ryan's favorites and is often talked about as the quintessential Bond movie, we thought it was a fitting choice.
At the time of its release, Goldfinger was the fastest grossing movie of all time, which is kind of a weird record. I'm not even sure what they... over how much time, how much money.
So fast. Just so fast.
Just real quick. And as Nate mentioned, it's often named the best Bond movie of all time. Federico Fellini actually called it one of those films that make cinema move forward. Though the style and feel of Bond movies have changed over time, from the campiness of the Roger Moore era to the serious grit of the current reign of Daniel Craig, the aesthetic of Goldfinger is often the one people remember and point to as the classic Bond feel.
But does that mean that it's any good? Does Goldfinger earn its place at the top of that list?
Or has its golden reputation caused it to die of skin suffocation? Which may or may not be a real thing.
May or may not be a real thing, but...
In any case, keep listening.
Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch, a spider's touch, such a cold finger beckons you to enter his web of sin.
That was the unmistakable theme to Goldfinger.
I love that song.
Oh, it's
I knew
amazing.
that song, by the way,
I'm
before
sure you
I
did.
saw the movie, and I've always loved that song.
Yeah, it's a great song. And, I heard a story about that song that may or may not be true, that when Shirley Bassey was singing it, she was watching the opening credits sequence as she was singing to kind of line up the song to what was happening on the video. And she hit that last note without realizing how much time was left in the opening credit sequence. And so she held this really powerful note for, according to the story, long enough that she almost passed out.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true.
That almost sounds like a Bond title in itself. The note that lasted too long.
Yeah, that does. That sounds like
It shows you how much I know about Bond.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. But there's something there. So we're talking about Goldfinger, and I've loved this movie for a really long time. I watched it a lot when I was a kid. It was the one that I would watch more than any other Bond movie.
Was it on TV a lot for you? Or?
No, I just checked it out a lot.
Oh, really?
Rented it a lot, yeah.
And Goldfinger was your parents were probably like, again, Ryan? Really?
They didn't. Nah, they didn't. I don't think they really cared. They didn't watch it with me every time. This was like junior high age.
Okay.
Like with GoldenEye, the video game, I just wanted to watch a lot of Bond movies.
So that's what made you go back.
Yeah.
You think?
I mean, I remember seeing them. My dad watched them when I was little. I don't know. I just liked them. And what was it? What station always did like the Bond marathon?
Was it TNT?
It might have been. That doesn't really matter. The
Matters
point
to
is,
me.
I'm sorry. The point is, I remember someone saying that Goldfinger was one I needed to see, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, I really like that one. And I don't know, it was just the one that stuck with me.
Yeah.
What was the point of that?
Well, we always try to get a little background, I guess. So you're just jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, but I had a thought. Oh, well.
I somehow have never seen this one. And actually, I was going... Any Sean Connery. And I went down the list, and I think...
Don't tell me you haven't seen a Roger Moore.
No, I actually have
He did like 11.
It's not about how many they did. It's about the fact that I didn't watch any James Bond movies. I've only seen Tomorrow Never Dies, which was the second Pierce Brosnan
Yep,
movie.
I saw that in the theater.
I saw that in the theater, and I really loved it when I saw it in the theater. That one had some pretty awesome action in it, actually.
Yeah.
Then I kind of stopped all the way. Well, not all the way because there wasn't much between,
It
but
was like one or two.
yeah. And then I stopped until Daniel Craig came on board, and I saw Casino Royale, and then I only saw Skyfall. That's kind of it.
That's crazy. Quantum
I
of
saw
Solace wasn't that
scenes of Moonraker. That went probably on one of those marathons because it was on
Probably,
TV. I remember.
yeah. That's crazy.
But what's weird is that I really did know a lot about James Bond. Like
Yeah.
all the stuff you're supposed to know, like the shaken, not stirred, and just the look of James Bond.
Yeah.
And also, for whatever reason, I obviously didn't get a lot of the references, but I love the Austin Powers movies when I was that age. You know,
Yeah.
those came out when I was in junior high, so
Yeah.
it was perfect.
I do think that Austin Powers had a hand in making me want to watch more Bond movies too. Playing the GoldenEye video game a ton.
And I played that game a lot, N64's GoldenEye.
Well, actually, another big thing that contributed to it was my friends and I in junior high, we would hang out and watch a Bond movie and then play GoldenEye till like dawn. So Bond was kind of a thing with me and my friends too. Yeah, it's funny to me that of the 24 Bond movies, you've seen 3 now?
Hardly any. And, you know, you always have your to watch list, the ones that you know you need to see. But even on that, the only ones that were really on there were Goldfinger and Dr. No.
Yeah.
I mean, are there other ones that are like absolutely essential? Even if you're not a James Bond fan, you need to see these James Bond movies? I mean, I would add Skyfall to that list.
For sure. Not need to. There are definitely good ones. There are also some terrible ones. I think the first 3 are really good. To Russia with Love is good. You missed that's Dr. No, To Russia with Love, and then Goldfinger are the first 3. And I think those are really good. I think Sean Connery's usually are pretty solid. Roger Moore's pretty hit and miss. Timothy Dalton, actually, he only did 2, but I think they're good. I've only seen one of them. But that's like a darker sort of...
Which one's that?
I think it's License to Kill.
That's the one that's the darker one you're talking about?
Yeah, the Timothy Dalton in the 80s.
Okay.
Some people really like the campiness of the Roger Moore ones.
I only know Roger Moore is the one that they reference in Lost in Translation.
Yeah.
When Bill Murray has to be more Bond. And he keeps saying Roger Moore.
Roger Moore, that's the one you go to. Like, okay. Yeah. No. I mean, aside from the ones Dr. No, Goldfinger, and then I think modern sensibility, Skyfall, I don't think anything's essential, but...
Is it kind of like comfort food for you?
It is. It was kind of funny. Maybe we'll talk more about this, but I was watching Goldfinger. I'm like, I don't need to watch this again to talk about it.
You just know, you've got everything you need to do this episode beforehand.
Yeah, I've seen it so much.
Like a good casserole.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like a good casserole, I guess. Mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving.
That's right. Well, let's bring the Letterboxd thing into it. We often rate our movies on letterboxd.com. And if you're listening to this and this is one of your first times listening, you know, we do recommend you go on to letterboxd.com where you can rate your movies and just follow us or we'll follow you and we can see what each other are watching.
Yeah.
Before jumping into our conversation, we get a baseline feel for where we're coming from for this movie. So I don't need to really ask you if your ratings changed, but are you going to go the full 5-star on this?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It was rated at 4 for me.
Okay.
I mean, as much as I have an affinity for it, I know it is what it is too. You know, it's a good spy James Bond movie.
Yeah.
I think the only James Bond that I would put, I think 4 is about the cap for me for that, for a James Bond movie. But Skyfall I think Skyfall actually did go higher than 4 for me because it's such a different movie.
Yeah.
It's a Bond art movie almost. So I think it's kind of in a different category for me. And it might have been for some Bond fans too.
And also just making it just look so great.
Oh, and absolutely. Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
But yeah, Goldfinger for me is a 4 on Letterboxd.
So for me, watching it for the first time now, I did take your advice to heart. At the last episode, you said you were worried because you thought, because I had seen Austin Powers, that I was going to just find parts of it funny.
Yeah.
And that you wanted me to try to...
I don't take it super seriously.
No, but you wanted me to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I guess.
Be aware of that.
Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah.
All right. So, and I can kind of talk about how I did that, but I do feel like I actually did that.
Good.
And I think I'm going to settle on 3.5, but I wouldn't look into that too much.
Oh, I'm not. Okay. I was only going to be offended if it was like less than 3, but not necessarily offended. I don't know. That's fine. You can rate it 3.5. We'll talk
Okay.
about it. That's why we're here. So Nate and I have our martinis.
I accidentally
preparation
stirred
for
mine,
this.
though.
You did. I saw that. I saw
like,
you
you're
grab
like, "What
the
are you
swizzle
doing?"
stick, but I was I was too far away. But mine's shaking. We're wearing tuxedos. The stage is set.
We're ready to get into this.
I haven't worn this tux in a while. And that's why it looks so tight on me.
Yeah. The sleeves are a little short.
You're right. I was the 17-year-old ring bearer. It was awkward for everybody, but
They always saw you as the little kid.
it's the tux I have, so it's the tux I'm wearing.
The tux you'll be buried in.
Yep. So we're what I'm saying is we're ready. We're ready for this. Where do we start? Where do we start with this? I feel like you should start it because I feel like I could probably go with you wherever.
Okay. Okay. So what I did, because I knew that if I just had jumped into it and watched it, it's an action movie, but it's old. So those are always hard to watch.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to just know the limitations of what they had. Also,
The style.
the stuff that would have blown them away at the time.
Yeah.
Action movies just have a pace to them over history that it's just so accelerated that you can grow so numb to the kind of things that were so amazing back then.
Yeah, you don't come to this movie at this point in time for the action.
Right. So I was more kind of watching it to kind of see what's this movie trying to do, and also where was it coming from. And so to answer that last question, I saw one of our listeners, Eric, who always chimes in. He also said you kind of have to start with Dr. No. And there's another listener, Eric, who's actually been on the show a couple times, who mentioned Dr. No on our Facebook post.
Yeah, we're a big hit with the Erics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So
So you watched Dr. No first.
I
Is that
actually,
what you're saying?
when I had Goldfinger, and then I said, you know what? I'm actually just going to go get Dr. No too.
a good
And
idea.
So I watched Dr. No first.
I
And I
advocate that.
hated that movie.
Did you really?
Oh my gosh.
People love that one.
I know. I don't get it.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
I don't even
I
get
don't
what's
remember.
great about
I
it.
watched it I think I watched it maybe
Maybe
twice.
it was very new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But even as like an action movie, or even as just a spy thriller, I mean, it seems very lame to me,
Yes.
even by 60s standards.
From what I remember of it, I remember being like, oh, I don't really need to see this again.
Yeah.
But I think it is. I think you're doing the right thing. It set everything up.
Yeah, Dr. No felt not quite confident even in what it was doing, or it hadn't
Almost
really
not sure
quite
how
figured it out. It was stumbling through it.
or what people would want from it.
Yeah, and so I'm really glad I did that, though, because I was like, I don't even really want to watch Goldfinger anymore. It's going to be anything like this. But what I was really pleasantly surprised by, almost from the beginning, when you pop in Goldfinger, is how much more assured of itself it is.
Yeah.
And just embodies everything that you've come to know about what James Bond is.
Right.
And I guess it was just kind of really nice to see, like, this is the Bond I know. It's right from the beginning. I mean, Dr. No has nothing like what Goldfinger has with even like the action scene in the very beginning.
Yeah.
That really doesn't have anything to do with the plot of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it just hooks you.
It just hooks you in.
Yeah.
That's new in Goldfinger. I didn't see To Russia with Love, so I can't speak to whether it came in the second movie, but
I don't recall.
and it had the movie's theme song in addition to the James Bond theme.
Right.
The title theme and that, I mean, I already talked about how I love the Goldfinger song, but that actual sequence is just really great to watch. I mean, all the projection on like the gold body,
painted
and
bodies, right?
it's very
It's that
sexy,
classic- yeah.
stylish. It's very cool.
And every Bond movie has imitated that ever since.
Yeah. And so pretty much right within the first 5-10 minutes of the movie, I was kind of in it.
Yeah. I don't know why they started with Dr. No, because Casino Royale is the first Bond novel, which is why when they kind of did Daniel Craig, they did Casino Royale so they could reboot everything with the origin story a little bit. I know that there were like several versions of Casino Royale, including like a spoof version, which is technically an official version, but like Woody Allen plays James
Really?
Bond at one point in it. Yeah, it's a very weird movie.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was also
Recommend it?
no. I actually watched that one when I was going through like a Woody Allen phase, not
Okay.
like a James Bond phase, because it's a comedy. It's a very weird movie. There was a Casino Royale TV show, I guess, at some point. So I don't know why they picked Dr. No to start with. But yeah, Goldfinger, like we said in the intro, it set the template, but it also is sort of, when people think of James Bond, they think of Goldfinger.
Yeah.
I feel like the opening sequence where he like takes off the scuba suit to have a perfectly pressed white tuxedo underneath, like that sort of like James Bond in the white tuxedo, that image kind of comes from this movie so clearly. Yeah, so you felt a little familiar as you watched it?
Yeah, and I also felt like, again, I haven't watched that many Bond films, but what I kind of liked about Sean Connery as Bond is that I laughed a little bit more. I think he says some. He
winks a little bit.
He winks a little bit.
He's not like Roger Moore, who's just like, "Okay, dude, we get it." Which you don't know that reference at all.
I just no clue.
You haven't seen it.
No. So there's the really cheesy one-liners, but I also feel like it's kind of okay to laugh at those. Like they know that they're cheesy one-liners. Right. In the opening, when he throws the fan into the tub.
Shocking. Positively shocking.
Okay, I'm pretty confident you're supposed to be laughing at that.
Right. Well, not just like, whoa.
Yeah. Like, man, I wish I would have come up with something as awesome as that.
Yeah.
I was going to say fan blade.
Yeah. I'm a fan of baths.
Said you're done.
Yeah. I think there is a playfulness to it that makes it endearing, I think.
And actually kind of, in a way, sells the more playboy aspect of James Bond. Whether that's good or bad, I think we can talk about. And whether that's really comfortable at all anymore is another conversation altogether. But Daniel Craig, I don't think, would sell that.
No, I don't think he would.
You know, obviously in the newer Bonds, he still is a guy that the ladies like and the ladies want. But it's mostly...
It's almost like he's
it's a burden to bear.
Well, almost like he knows it's either something he does for the job or something that he knows is an empty experience. He's like, I'm filling a void that nothing can fill. Like, I've killed so many people. Like, I feel like he's got dead eyes.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig's Bond has kind of dead eyes rather than like the twinkling, like winking eyes of Sean Connery.
So I guess if you're going to ask me, like, you know, do I like Sean Connery as Bond? I mean, I liked his take on it because it's the original take on it for the movies as far as that's concerned. But I'm not familiar with that. You know, I only really know what Pierce Brosnan looks like as Bond and what Daniel Craig looks like as Bond. And so comparing it to them, it's a little bit more playful.
Yeah.
And it's certainly of its era.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
But it almost needed that playfulness to make the stuff that doesn't hold up so well, a lot of like the sexism and the mild racism, I think that's in a lot of it. What I think allows you to kind of not necessarily gloss over it, but understand it as being sort of its time is the way Sean Connery plays it, which is never mean. Right.
I would agree. Which could make it more bearable, but it could also be like, oh, we shouldn't like this guy at all.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard line to walk because you don't want to. It's not excusable.
No.
But I guess if you're trying to get into the mindset of where this was coming from, you can at least understand that in a way it was coming from an innocent place.
Innocent-ish, yeah.
Innocent-ish. I'll put it that way.
Wasn't,
yeah. Doesn't make it excusable.
What you're saying.
And if that were to come out today, it would be inexcusable.
There were a lot of men who respected women and loved their wives and had good relationship with their mothers who maybe would have smacked somebody on the butt and said the men are talking. Like,
right. I shouldn't laugh at that, but it's funny to see now.
Yeah.
Because it's so outlandish.
It's like it's not appropriate, but those men weren't bad men.
Right.
They were like, yeah. So it is tough to watch this through modern eyes a little bit. But at the same time, I would feel like if somebody only saw Bond as misogynistic, I would say that was too narrow. He does care about some white women in the movie. I'll give that to him.
What a glowing recommendation from Ryan.
I'm not, in saying I like Goldfinger, I'm not defending those sorts of negative things.
How's this?
It's nice. Very nice.
Just here.
No, a little lower, darling.
I thought I'd find you in good hands.
Felix! Felix, how are you? Dink, meet Felix Leiter.
Hello.
Felix, say hello to Dink.
Hi, Dink.
Dink, say goodbye to Felix. Man talk.
But I think it is so easy, and I don't want to retread stuff that maybe we talked about like in Gone with the Wind, but it is easy to be just so anachronistically PC about all of these movies that we watch from the past.
Right.
If you can watch them with that sensitivity and an understanding of knowing like, okay, this is where we're at now. It's not where that movie was coming from.
Yeah.
It allows you to try to see what was the good in the characters there.
Yeah.
And there is good in James Bond.
And it wasn't the point of the character. It's not the motivation of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. But ultimately his motivation is avenging the death of Joe Masterson.
Yeah. And at the same time, though, and something I think that we do have to address is that James Bond has always been, and still to this day, I think is, a male fantasy. And just living out those male fantasies that are there.
Yeah.
And it might not be PC, but even a lot of that stuff that's in Goldfinger, a lot of males would fantasize about. They would fantasize about these women who you just kind of have to say something really clever and they'll jump right into bed with you. And then they'll be totally fine with how you treat them afterwards. You know?
Over and out. That should keep him occupied for quite some time.
I'm beginning to like you, Mr. Bond.
Oh, call me James.
More than anyone I've met in a long time, James.
Well, what on earth are we going to do about it?
Yes, what?
I'll tell you at dinner.
Where?
Well, I know the best place in town.
And also just being the person who always knows what to do in every situation and doesn't really sweat anything and just knows everything about all the wines or the food or whatever situation you're in. You just know everything. He is basically a spy version of what Hugh Hefner built himself up to look like.
Yeah. Did you listen to On the Media?
Yes, I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did they talk about Bond in that? They just talked
about Hugh Hefner.
Yeah.
About that was like his goal. He wanted an alternative to like the woodsy man. He wanted the sophisticated man who knew literature and music and like all this stuff.
It is worth bringing up because I was reading that there's a tradition in James Bond movies where the Bond girl doesn't show up nude in the movie, but then goes on to do, even before the movie's released, a Playboy spread.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think I read that in the Roger Ebert review of Goldfinger.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
James Bond has always been a PG-13 version of the male fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Playboy was kind of like
our X-rated version.
The more R X-rated version of that same fantasy.
Mm. All right.
It's interesting that your first experience watching Bond and really loving it was when you were in junior high. And mine was also when I was in junior high. I was in 7th or 8th grade and saw Tomorrow Never Dies. And I think there is something in James Bond movies that really doesn't. No, I don't think. I think
no, I wasn't saying it badly. I'm saying base level, I guess, is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Like not especially thoughtful, not especially nuanced.
No, and also really kind of like sugar or like candy for those insecurities that every guy deals with.
Okay. That's an interesting take on it. I think that there was one scene that gave me kind of I was like, ooh, that's problematic, is when he and Miss Galore
just say it. Just say it.
Yep, there is a character named Pussy Galore in this movie, which was that veiled at the time that the movie came out, or was everybody who watched the movie, they were like, oh my gosh?
No, actually, that name would have meant everything back then that it meant now. And I was reading the Wikipedia article on Goldfinger, and they reference a few interviews from the time with the producers, Broccoli and what was the other? Saltzman. It said, I'm just going to read actually from the article. You can look it up yourself. Concerned about censors, the producers thought about changing the character's name to Kitty Galore, but they and Hamilton being Guy Hamilton, the director, decided, quote, if you were a 10-year-old boy and knew what the name meant, you weren't a 10-year-old boy. You were a dirty little bitch.
Oh my gosh. What the heck?
The American censor was concerned, but we got around that by inviting him and his wife out to dinner and told him we were big supporters of the Republican Party. So that's how, because that's the UK. Like,
Oh my gosh.
that kind of feeds into my whole theory of James Bond really appealing to that adolescent, juvenile male mindset. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a critical way, because part of that mindset never really grows up.
I did not. When you said you had a good quote, I was like, "Oh, this will be interesting." A very fun. And then no, you just somebody calling 10-year-old boys dirty little bitches. Is that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go back to finishing my thought.
Go ahead. All right.
Which was the scene that was problematic to me. That was like, eek. I don't know if I would want to. I don't know.
Was it the hay scene?
It was the hay scene
because it
when they're like
borders on
fighting
aggressive.
and she's pushing. She's like trying. She's genuinely fighting him off, and he overpowers her to kiss her.
Yes.
And
And
then
so where
she
where does the martial arts end and the sex kind of begin? Is kind of where.
And when does her? There is no clear enthusiastic consent at any point in that.
So let's kind of recap what happens in the movie.
Okay.
So James Bond and Pussy Galore get into a tussle in a barn with hay. They literally roll around in the hay.
They're having a roll in the hay. Well, they're on Goldfinger's
property in Kentucky.
Yeah, and he owns racehorses.
Yes.
So it's not weird that they're by a barn with hay.
No.
But it's a little on the nose for them to actually be rolling in the hay.
But I think what you're supposed to believe happened, which is a little unbelievable, is that maybe the sex was so great or James Bond was just such a magnetic character that he somehow wooed her over to his side and realized that this whole plan that Goldfinger had put into place was terrible and that she was a bad person for being a part of it.
Well, she was never totally on Goldfinger's side either. She was getting paid.
Yeah. But her role in it was to basically have her flying circus, Pussy Galore's flying circus, fly over Fort Knox and gas all the soldiers there so that Goldfinger could go in and do his dirty work with the gold.
Right.
So what you realize, not till the very end of the movie, but what you realize is that she actually, somewhere in that period after the roll in the hay, got a clear conscience, and she's the one who notified Washington about the entire plan.
Yeah.
And switch the gas tanks with just whatever,
Water,
some kind of gas that wasn't poisonous. And that made it so that the actual soldiers were able to jump in and save the day at the very end. And you don't realize that until the very end.
How glad were you that that was not really poison when all those people were falling down?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, this is so lame, but then they were all faking it.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
It's okay that it was lame. It's also just kind of terrible because they don't really give any weight to the fact that she's gassing an entire camp of soldiers.
Bond does say, so you're going to kill 60,000 people because you know that's a poison, that gas will kill people, not just knock them unconscious, which is what he says earlier in the movie.
But he says that to Goldfinger, not to her.
Right. Yeah, maybe she didn't know because he was saying that it'll just knock people unconscious.
Yeah.
Maybe she wouldn't have done it otherwise. So that might have changed her mind. Maybe Bond told her that. Little pillow talk. I'm guessing as he twirled her hair in his fingers, he said, "Oh, and by the way, that gas you're going to use on Fort Knox will kill everybody, not just knock them unconscious." She said, "Hey, that's a great point. Regardless of the quality of the sex, it's a really good point. And I'm a thinking, wise woman with a conscience, and you've changed my mind with this new information."
Yeah, and that's
probably what happened.
Way too boring for a Bond film, so they just cut that.
Yeah,
it's on the cutting room floor.
It's not quippy.
Somewhere.
It's not quippy.
You're right, though, that is a very uncomfortable to see because he still comes out looking very suave and all of that.
Speaking of things that are uncomfortable, did they ever explain, I don't recall, why Goldfinger has an all-Asian henchman staff?
The only thing I can think of, and that it wasn't explained, is that he is working with the Chinese.
That's true. Can I put forth a thought that I had? And my note on this begins with, "Oh shit."
Okay. I want to hear this.
I'll just read my note.
Okay.
"Oh shit. Are his henchmen Asian because he likes yellow things?"
Oh, geez. Hey, I hadn't thought of that one.
That's but like he surrounds himself with yellow and gold.
Yes. Yeah.
And he only has Asian henchmen.
Yeah.
Is that a racist 60s thing?
It could be. I wouldn't put it past it. But is it worth it to kind of maybe also talk about what Goldfinger's ultimate plan is? Because I think that is actually a big reason why a lot of his men just happen to be Asian.
Wow, you are being very generous with this supervillain.
But wait a second. Listen. His whole plot.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this. His whole plot is he's a guy who's all
gold markets.
He's already been stockpiling gold for himself.
Yes.
And then his whole plan is to basically ruin the entire gold supply of the United States so that his gold becomes much more valuable than what it currently is. But the only way that he's able to kind of get the resources he needs to do this whole thing is to convince
the Chinese nuclear weapon,
all of the East and the communist regimes.
Right.
You know, it's a Cold War movie.
To get them against the U.S.
To get them against the U.S. is to say, if I do this, it's going to throw the entire U.S. economy into turmoil. And then you guys can come in and rise.
Okay.
And become the powers that you want to be.
Okay.
So
then they staffed him. And
now, why wasn't it Russians? I don't know.
I don't know either.
It could have been Russians.
Could have been.
Did it have to be Asians?
I don't know. For Goldfinger, maybe it did.
Maybe it's just that they hired Oddjob. You know, and they're like, well, he can't come out of nowhere.
Oddjob's doing a great job. Yeah,
Oddjob's great. You know, I guess we got to have everyone else be of his ethnicity.
Yeah, Oddjob was Korean. Did he mention the Koreans?
Oh no,
but they were communist. All right. I hope your part is true. I hope your thought is true.
I also wouldn't be surprised if you were the right one.
I hope I'm wrong. So. This movie has, and our listener Eric actually emailed us, this movie has so many enduring images, things in it that just have lived on, and he gave a very comprehensive list.
Again, Eric always comes to the rescue in our episodes.
He does. Eric talked about the Aston Martin, and the Aston Martin has so many of those awesome tricks. It's got the smoke screen, it's got the grease that it sprays. It's got the ejector seat. It's got the homing device.
It's got the Ben-Hur chariot style spikes that come out of the...
Yeah, it's got the rotating license plate.
Yes. Who would have thought of that? And that was actually another element of Goldfinger that wasn't in Dr. No. The whole gadget and the whole talk with Q about
branch.
This. Yeah. And in fact, I think I was reading that Goldfinger really was the first Bond that brought the real gadgetry into the Bond franchise. But that car is pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. And the blue terry cloth poolside outfit that Bond wears in the early scene. And the laser scene, of course.
Yeah.
Is iconic.
And it's still good. It still holds up,
yeah,
I think.
I think so, too.
You know. Obviously, Bond lives. We've got plenty of other Bond films still. Yeah. But you still were kind of like, oh, man, it's getting real close.
Yeah. And then the Q branch scene is just so classic Bond, too. When they, you see the people in the background trying out different things.
Morning, Q.
Morning, 007. This way, please.
All right, we're out busy this morning.
It's not perfected yet.
Where's my Bentley?
Oh, it's had its day, I'm afraid.
But it's never let me down.
M's orders, 007. You'll be using this Aston Martin DB5 with modifications. Now, pay attention, please.
I wonder, though, has Q Branch ever had anything perfected? Because I feel like every time he visits Q Branch and everything he gives him, he's like, now be careful with this, Bond. It's not been perfected yet. And it's like, maybe test it a little bit longer. Then don't give me this bomb in a pen if it's not going to work well.
The Q Branch is very comfortable with beta.
Yeah. And even the ejector seat, he's like, now this red button here. Yeah. Don't touch it. Like, well, then don't put it in there, man.
Right. Or at least just make it like, isn't there like somewhere you can just kind of snip the cable and then reattach it later on when this is done?
It's not going to work, Bond. We've cut the cable. We're still trying it out. I think Q's drunk in my impression of him.
That would explain why most of the stuff doesn't work.
Another thing is Goldfinger's sort of lair. Now, this one's not as elaborate as other ones. Like, this is not in a volcano or whatever. It's just on a farm.
That's something that Dr. No actually had on Goldfinger.
Yes.
Was that there was the whole island and that whole compound or whatever it was of Dr. No's.
But it was pretty funny to me that he had all that elaborate, like that rotating pool table and everything moved and all over.
Yeah.
Pretty much just to show people where Fort Knox is. and they had already listed everything he shows them. He's like, as you mentioned, an electrified fence. Like, great, dude. You just like pushed us all out of the middle of the room and we were playing pool there.
Yeah. And can we talk for just a second about how ridiculous and not tough those mafia guys seem?
Yeah.
Like every time something happens, you're like,
turn out the lights.
What's going on here? What's going on here? And it's
Turn those lights back on, Goldfinger.
What's that pool table? Merry-go-round?
What's with the trick pool table, Goldfinger?
They're just scared by everything he's doing.
What's that? It's a fan. It's a slight breeze.
Wait, someone touch me?
Yeah. They weren't very good. That was a pretty poorly written scene, but it's still kind of a great one. Like
that was okay. So that's where I started to kind of drop it down to a realistic, more 3.5. It's just kind of like, okay, this is very convenient. I'm gonna lay out this entire plan, and James Bond's just gonna happen to be underneath and just kind of listen in on it.
Yeah.
Oh, got that now.
Thank you.
Really? and for what? He lays out the entire plan to just kill them anyways?
Right. This time watching it, I was like, oh, that's weird. Why did he do that?
The gold depository at Fort Knox, gentlemen. In its vaults are $15 billion. The entire gold supply of the United States.
Knock off Fort Knox?
Got a key or something?
Of a kind.
There are 35,000 troops stationed around there.
41,000.
And who's going to say boo to them, Goldfinger?
Hey, what's going on here? Hey, what is it? Hey, on the floor, my feet!
I don't know. Kind of a big plot hole. Or
Yeah.
maybe I just wasn't watching closely. Like the 50 times I've seen it.
Well, and
I can tell you that scene to a junior higher, not the most interesting scene. I'm zoning out.
when it comes to a James Bond movie, I think you just kind of have to be a little bit more forgiving of that kind of thing.
Right.
And it does actually make me want to ask you something, which is,
oh, okay.
how much do you think James Bond movies are made to ever be rewatched?
Oh.
Or are they kind of their time? And because I kind of wonder why I never really did go back to them. And I think it's because how many James Bond movies do people really talk about? Like, oh yeah, you got to watch that again. You got to, it'll get so much better the next time you watch it. Or like,
well, yeah.
It seems like every James Bond movie you watch is so much of its time. You even watch like the Pierce Brosnan Bonds, and they're very 90s.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to look at even the Daniel Craig ones, and we're going to be like, "Yep, that looks like a movie."
No, they'll live forever. I don't know. I mean,
like, are they kind of just made as entertainment?
Yeah,
not really meant to be something that we revisit very often, or
you don't revisit it for the same reason you revisit There Will Be Blood
or The Godfather, or
right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not layered like that, but I think with Bond specifically, the formula makes it comfortable or comforting. Like you just, I really want a spy kind of movie, and I want it to fit this formula. A Bond movie is going to do that.
And I could see myself watching Goldfinger again, but I'm wondering why. Like, because you're not really going to dig into it and get a whole lot more.
I mean, people rewatch fluff movies all the time. I think James Bond is a character that remains compelling, and it's not necessarily that any single James Bond movie is worth watching more than once. Again, except for maybe Skyfall, because that movie is different. But since I like spy movies and I like spy stories and James Bond, Goldfinger was the one that kind of hit it for me. And it hit it for a lot of people, I think, because it set the template. Goldfinger's plan is unique. It's not just some weird, convoluted thing.
It didn't sound like Dr. Evil.
Right.
Like from
it sounded
Austin
more
Powers.
like the Joker.
Yeah.
Where he just wants to go in and mess stuff up to his advantage.
Right.
not just amass wealth, but like I'm going to get wealthier by ruining a powerful country's wealth.
Right.
You know? So I think it's a tough question to answer in general, but I think I can speak for Goldfinger because it's kind of that movie for me, that there's just something a cut above the standard genre movie. I know I've compared movies to Friends before, but this one, like this, not specifically Goldfinger, but those movies that you know aren't that great, but you get back to me, it's like, you know, you've got a really good friend when you don't have to do anything when you're together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the friend that you would be comfortable watching TV with and like just flipping through the channels? There's something great about that friendship where you don't have to talk, you don't have to do anything.
You don't have to think.
Right. You're just there. That person's there for you, you know? And they may eat loudly or something, and other people who don't know them would be like, how can you stand it? You're like, I don't even notice
Never
it anymore.
bothered me.
That's just, that's just that person, you know? So like, I think people find that in certain movies and music and books and TV shows and stuff. And maybe Goldfinger's that for me.
Yeah. Okay, how about let's go back to the ratings. So after the discussion, I mean, it seems like nothing's really going to change.
No, you're not going to like blow this one open for me.
You're probably at 4 stars because of when you saw it and
probably,
its connection to you, and that's fine.
Nostalgia.
For me, it's 3.5 because I do recognize it as one of the better Bond movies I've seen. So 3.5, it's well deserved. You know.
I think it's not just the time period that I saw it that I'm like, you know, still in some arrested development. Like my 13-year-old mind can't forget my first feelings. I think because I'm a Bond fan, because I'm comparing it to all the other Bond movies, I'm comparing it to spy movies in general. Also film history a little bit, not to, that sounds pretty highfalutin, but I just mean its impact.
Right.
The lasting images, like the iconic scenes and lines and stuff. It's all tied in there for me.
Yeah.
And that it still holds up. Like, it's not like...
No, it's not laughably
It's not
bad.
like Dr. No, where you are like, okay, it kicked it all off, but I'm glad it got better.
Right.
So that's why it's got 4. It's not just stubborn nostalgia.
All right. The best buds?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Let's keep it at that then.
All right. So we're best buds. It's good news.
It is good news.
So our next episode, we were just looking at the calendar. The holidays are approaching.
Yes.
Thanksgiving.
That's one of them.
Very soon. That's one. I'm blanking on the others. I'll figure it out. But our calendars are full, Nate and I.
Yeah.
Nate and I.
Things
it
get
happens.
busy.
It happens.
We both have our own families. We both have full-time jobs, and you know, things just get busy.
Yep. So we're unfortunately only gonna have one more episode between now and the new year. So we're doing our Christmas episode. It's not super early. Black Friday will have passed.
Right. Well, we probably honestly won't actually release the episode until December. But it'll be hopefully
almost
early
guaranteed.
December. Yeah.
Yeah. The point is, we're gonna take a little vacation, but we're not breaking up. We'll be back.
We might even be friends in the midst of that vacation.
Yeah. I bet we will, because the episode that we are doing to celebrate the holidays is an attempt to wash away the bitterness of last year's holiday episode. Our bitterest.
Yes,
episode.
it was our
It's
first most contentious episode yet, and it just
it's
happened
my
to be
darkest episode too.
And
I
it just
think.
happened to be our Christmas episode, which I've always kind of felt guilty about because Christmas should be such a joyful time.
And
and we ended up.
It was not a good episode. It was a fine episode. All of them are. But
go back to that archive if you want to hear some.
On CanWeStillBeFriends.net. But I explored some dark regions of my psyche and my childhood.
And I was just getting frustrated that one of my favorite movies was getting torn apart.
Right.
And,
so there was just a lot of bitterness. We're gonna rectify that in the spirit of the holidays, Thanksgiving being one of them, by watching, I think it's safe to say, both our favorite Christmas movies.
Yeah, over time it has definitely grown to that.
Me too.
And so
I liked it when I was a kid, but it's only gotten stronger.
Right,
My feelings
and it is,
for it.
There are a handful that I try to watch every year, but that's one I will not celebrate Christmas without watching.
Of course. And so we're going to be joyous. We're going to celebrate this movie together. We're going to hopefully it's going to be more than just joyful tears and squealing. I'm sure you're saying, just tell us the movie because I want this episode to end. And we will tell you the movie, but this movie is one that we both love. Like I said, I loved it when I was a kid, and I've only grown to love it more as an adult. That movie is Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yes, but I think we kind of have to sell it in
I
this
kind of
episode
do too.
because you don't hear it talked about all that often as being one of the best Christmas movies made. This was the one with Michael Caine as Scrooge, the Muppets, which everyone loves.
Kermit is one.
He's one of them. I think Gonzo is another one.
There might be a Gonzo in there. We'll list them. We're just blanking right now, and so we're not going to try to convince each other about this movie because we agree.
No need.
We're going to celebrate the movie. Perhaps the one who needs convincing is you,
the one with
listener.
The heart 2 sizes too small.
Yeah.
For Muppet Christmas Carol.
But
might be you.
You're mixing movies. It's a little. Don't confuse them. But like Nate said, it's not one that necessarily people say, name the best Christmas movie.
Muppet Christmas Carol.
Muppet Christmas Carol. We do think, though, that more people should say that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably just never saw it. So if you are one of those people, I think just by us doing this episode, I'm hoping that you just catch it. That you actually just decide for Christmas this year, I'm going to watch it. If you don't celebrate Christmas, it's still just, I think, is a universal story in itself.
The message of Christmas Carol, especially the Muppet Christmas Carol, is very universal.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a great movie.
Thinking about it now, and I just love it.
So I'm excited to watch it again. I know I was going to watch it anyways, so it's nice because it's not going to really be something I have to make time for this podcast.
That's a good point.
So
I'll have to bump it up a little bit in my timetable.
But that only means I can watch it again.
You know what? I'm probably going to watch it around Thanksgiving.
Okay.
After the Packer-Bear game, or before the Packer-Bear game because it's a night game.
If you've seen Muppet Christmas Carol, if you've got thoughts about it, if you think we're off our rockers and it's like the worst movie ever, it's the worst rendition of Christmas Carol, the worst Muppets movie ever, I'd love to hear your wrong argument.
Here's the thing: we'll listen with open ears if you share your thoughts with an open heart as well, not a cudgel.
So whatever your thoughts are, please leave them in all of the various ways you can leave feedback with Can We Still Be Friends, and that is on our website, www.canwestillbefriends.net. You can comment on any one of our episodes. You can also send us an email, feedback@canwestillbefriends.net.
We're on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We also have a voicemail number that you can call.
We'd love to hear from you. The number is 847-306-9532.
Maybe you can sing your comments in a style of a Christmas Carol.
Maybe.
You don't have to.
Give it a shot. Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
What do you got to lose?
Come on, guys.
What do you have to lose?
There's no judgment here.
Anyways, and also, make sure you also share any thoughts you have on this episode of Goldfinger, any thoughts about James Bond. Did you see Spectre? Did you see Spectre, Ryan?
I did not see Spectre.
I didn't either.
One day to do that.
Yeah, true. I thought maybe you went open. You're such a fan. I thought maybe you would have, gone opening night.
I'll see it.
Anyways, let us know what you think of anything, any of our past episodes. We just love to hear it all. So
or whatever's on your mind. We'll listen.
We'll listen. We just want to thank you for tuning in and listening and subscribing to our podcast. And if you've ever left us a rating on iTunes or done anything to help us out, we always appreciate that.
Yeah. If you haven't, there's still time. Leave us a rating on iTunes. Tell your friends about this podcast. It would be greatly appreciated.
It would. We hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving because we won't talk to you until after that.
Yeah. Have a good Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey. You'll be stuffed.
Or do.
Whatever. Yeah, no judgments,
Thanksgiving.
like we said.
It's Thanksgiving.
Whatever.
Be thankful. Eat what you want.
Yep.
Don't let Ryan tell you how much to eat. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Say goodbye.
I can't.